All right, well, let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can everybody see that?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to come tonight and show you the proposed project that we are working on, and get your feedback and look for ways to improve it. So a little bit about myself. My name is Ted Seeley. I'm a senior project manager with Lincoln Avenue Capital. Prior to Lincoln Avenue Capital, I was the program manager for the low-income housing tax credit program for the state of New Hampshire. And then prior to that, I had worked for an affordable housing developer and also was a program manager for the city of New York, doing affordable development. I'm joined this evening by Scott Shaw. He is the vice president and regional project partner for Lincoln Avenue Capital. Scott has over 22 years of development experience in affordable housing, most recently for Community Development Corporation in Boston. And prior to that, actually, Scott and I had both worked for the same affordable housing developer and have worked on projects in Rhode Island in the past. So as you can see, here's a rendering of the project. We'll get more into the design in a minute. Just a little bit about Lincoln Avenue Capital. So Lincoln Avenue Capital is a national affordable housing developer, mission driven. We only develop affordable housing. Currently, we're in 20 states. This says 18, but we're in 20 now. We have over 100 residents, 100 properties, and 50,000 plus residents. So here's the locus map for the project. You can see here the site right there on Washington Street, right on the edge of I-95 coming around the bend. Here's a closer view of it. So right along the service frontage road, the site is currently being used as a parking lot. It's a C2 zone. So I'll hand it over to Scott to discuss a little bit about the project.
All right, so here's our site layout. What we're proposing, if you zoom it in just a little bit, Ted, for my visual impairment. We are an L-shaped building. So the portion of the building on Washington Street right now is proposed as podium parking, where you see the two arrows, one in and one out. Present zoning states that we have to have a for every unit, a half a parking space. So this represents right now 36 parking spaces. Concurrent with this application, we're going to be making application with the city under their TOD program, which will result in less dense parking spaces, less asphalt, and we'll be able to fill in that portion of the building that's presently podium parking. But right now, in order to get the approvals that we're looking for and to submit a financing application in January, we're submitting it for relief under current zoning, and again, simultaneously going in for the change to TOD. What will happen there then is that left half portion of the building would no longer be podium parking. It would be resident amenity space. And Ted, if you go to the next slide, actually go to the next one after this, and then I'll jump back there. So here you see in the upper left-hand portion, that kind of blank spot under the word Washington Street represents the podium parking. And then to the left and down represents the first floor of the building with resident amenity space. We're going to have a mix of studios, 1s and 2 bedrooms. And on the first floor, we'll have leasing office, we'll have maintenance office, we'll have a wellness fitness center. We'll have a computer lab that I like to call for continuing education purposes, or just any type of on-site services we can provide residents to help them elevate up and out. The goal isn't anyone shouldn't be affordable for life. Give them the services, give them the tools, give them what they need to move up. We are proposing on the first floor will be an on-site maintenance office. The maintenance superintendent here would live on-site, so there'd be direct contact. I don't like to say the person's available 24/7, but they are in case of emergencies. But we'll have that on-site representation. The left half of the building there, where podium is right now, what we'll do is we'll backfill that in with additional amenity uses for the residents. The current zoning code on Washington Street does not permit residential units within 20 feet of Washington Street. So we wouldn't backfill to get higher density. We just expand our footprint on the first floor for amenity space for the residents. And that could include some tenant storage, additional bike space, storage space, and some benefits to the residents. Ted, if you just go back here, I'll just touch on the units. So I did mention we have a mix of studios, 1s and 2 bedrooms. Our rents right now are for the studio at $1,015 a month. For the 1 bedroom, $1,088, and for the 2 bedroom, $1,306. Those are net rents. I'm sorry, those are gross rents, which include utility allowance. Once we give the residents a utility allowance, those would be reduced. The net rents would be reduced by that amount. I mentioned the gross rents right now because we are contemplating and researching right now whether or not we can do solar on the roofs, solar panels, and those solar panels, if we're able to do that and accommodate it, can negate out the utility costs for the residents, and we would absorb the electric and the utility costs ourselves as owner, thus, making a unit really truly affordable for the residents. Ted, let's see. After that, we got. Okay, so our unit floor plan, this is the typical layout, and it's replicated on floors 2 through 6. Again, it's a mix of studios, 1s and 2s, and consistent with HUD regulations. There's no concentration of a particular unit type, or ADA accessible units on any particular floor. It's scattered and throughout. So we will have 10% of our units will be ADA compliant. We also have 2% of our units will be for hearing visually impaired. Ted,
All right.
you can take the color portion.
Yes, I'll just talk a little bit about the design. And we'll just sort of wrap up the presentation here and get into discussion and questions. But I just wanted to point out, so you can see here, this is multiple materials. You have a screen detail that, see here, right here. Can you see my cursor on the screen? Yeah. All right. So the elevation right along Washington Street. So the parking entrance will have a cedar screen that separates it from the streetscape. You have like a fiber cement board that is being used. You have brick on the ground level, and the design itself, right along the 95 corridor, it's at its highest point, and then it steps down to become more in line with the neighborhood. And you can see that in the design here. You also have the breakup of the streetscape to provide variation and aesthetic interest in the project. So, and then lastly, we have a pergola on the rooftop. This will be additional amenity space for the residents. We'll have amazing views of downtown. And then these are just some additional views as well. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And I'll just close with a couple of comments. Our development, we contemplate doing a hybrid financing application to Rhode Island Housing, which involves half the units would be financed with 4% credits utilizing bonds from Rhode Island Housing, and the other half developed with 9% credits and some subordinate soft money, low interest money from the city and from the state. Doing it that way, it allows a developer to do 76 units versus having to make this 2 separate and distinct financing applications in 36 units apiece. And had it been done that way, it's spaced out. You do one, 3 years later, you do the next one. 6 years, you get 76 units. So by doing this model that the state has afforded us, it allows cities in great need to have high density and have high units brought on quicker than normal.
That's great. Thank you guys for that presentation. I think we can just sort of open it up to questions now. There's only about 9 of us, so I think, you know, we can go to the sort of hand raising thing if we need to, but for the time being, I would say let's just see if it can work with folks jumping into questions.
Hi, everyone. I can't stay for the whole length, so I just figured I'd jump in. My name's Haley. I'm an architect in the area, a neighbor, and this project is super exciting. We definitely are in dire need of affordable housing in this area. I'm very excited to hear you guys are contemplating solar on the roof as well. I just had a few thoughts. I know you mentioned that there couldn't be any residential units along Washington Street, but compared to the service road, people definitely walk along Washington Street. It's kind of turning into more of a commercial corridor. And if the ground floor active spaces, like the community room, the computer room, the gym, all that program that you guys mentioned, if it could be rearranged along Washington Street instead of the service road to kind of activate that area, I know that would kind of take a whole reworking of the plans, but just wonder if you guys considered that at all.
Yeah, actually, so the rework part 2 actually has that. So the Washington Street, Ted, pull up the elevation that kind of shows how that with the pillars, how that will be activated, covered seating area. But Haley, yes, as you mentioned, that will have the activation space of the wellness center and the computer lab, and on the outside portion underneath, we'll have benches, sitting areas, just places for folks to sit down and either have a cup of coffee, have lunch, and just make the outside area just part of the community. You don't have to live there to be able to utilize it. Ted, do you have that elevation?
I don't, let me see if I can pull it up separate. It's not part of the presentation.
I think it's, show the first one, the very first cover page.
Can you see it?
No, I think you got to stop share the one you had, maybe.
Oh, I didn't realize I wasn't sharing anymore. There we go.
So yeah, I mean, you can. This doesn't do it justice. It might be a different one, but the area where the cursor is, where those you can see some gray pillars, that will actually be open active space, and that's where we'll activate it for anybody, the community, to be able to sit there and meet with someone, have a cup of coffee, have lunch. But have that whole corridor, once the podium parking is gone, be that active area you mentioned, Haley. And then the other half, we did actually contemplate having 4 units in the other portion of the L-shaped. My goal isn't really to increase density. I think we are going to go in and ask for 80 units, just in case we do want to squeeze 3 more units out after we move this around a little bit. But definitely, I welcome your input and your thought on that, because we want to really make this not just active for the residents, but active for the community as a whole.
One clarification question on that, Scott. Am I right in thinking that there's like an overhang there where there's space between the pillars and the front of the building? Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, and there would be, especially on the redesign, you can't really see it here, but if there actually is that amenity space along Washington Street, it's more setback, it's more pronounced.
Hi, this is Yvonne. Could you show again where the entrance the access to the parking garage would be?
Yes. See if I can zoom out here. You can see here, right off of Washington Street, and it cuts through to Lyman.
So 2 points of, entry in right off of Lyman is one, but in and out off of Washington Street under this representation with podium parking. And with this also, I should mention, it gets kind of quirky because the current zoning with the podium parking here, you'll see that zoning said we had to account for a loading area, and in the bottom right portion, Ted, now zoom in real far next to the tree there. So we had to shift some parking to make it tandem parking because current code and regulation requires that we have a certain amount of square footage as loading for in and out move-ins and move-outs. So this is a very unique situation that we're going in with a variance for something and simultaneously wanting to do the overlay that the city wants. And the reason we're doing this also is it's a difference between the project potentially being funded in 12 months versus 24 months and having an application go into the state approved and properly zoned. But those are the 2 points of access in and out.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, so the current ordinance for a loading zone has a height restriction, and so it actually wouldn't provide enough clearance underneath this podium to have it where we initially thought, which was the entrance was actually going to be over a little bit, and then that would provide a loading area, but the height wouldn't work. So there is a proposed ordinance to amend the loading zone dimensions, and that according to planning, that process is taking place right now. So once that's amended, we can go ahead and change the parking configuration from tandem parking like you see here back to the original circulation, which is single row parking. Makes much more sense.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions. One is, could you talk a little bit about what type of landscaping you're proposing for the site? And then the other question I have is, I don't know if you showed the elevation from, Ms. Haley pointed out, it is pretty pedestrian heavy area. So kind of want to see what the view is as you're walking up Washington towards downtown. So I guess that would be the west elevation, if you have a
Yep.
view of what that looks
and
like.
I can speak briefly to the landscape while I have this slide up, probably shows the best. We do have a landscape architect as well that we're working with, but what we would have is there's, according to zoning, we're required to have a certain amount of canopy coverage. And so we would be planting trees along Washington Street. I believe there's 4 trees that would be planted right in front. And then we have these trees along Lyman Street in the back. And then actually on the east edge of the site, there, if you're familiar with it, there is an area of overgrowth, and there are existing trees there now. That's actually a DOT-owned parcel. So what we intend to do is to participate in the Adopt a Spot, clean up that, which basically would mean we wouldn't own the site, but we would be stewards of it. So we would clean up that portion of it. We're working with the city arborist to determine which Trees are worthy of saving. Of course, we want to save as many trees as we can. Sometimes, depending if they may look like trees, but they are just large weeds. So we need those to be identified. And that would be, we would plant native grasses, that kind of thing. So it would look much more kept. And then as far as the view, the west elevation. So here's the west elevation here. This would be, this would be from, this is Washington Street right here. And then this would be the frontage. And you can see this is the setback L, and then you have parking in here.
Okay. Is there any, I didn't see any trees or any landscaping from that side. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, these plans were our approval set. We actually do have a landscape plan that I can try to pull up. I didn't include it in the presentation. But as far as landscape renderings, the only rendering that we have that shows the plantings as proposed is this one here. So you can see here, this strip is the DOT-owned parcel. And then these are the 4 trees that we are proposing to be planted along Washington Street.
Thank you.
Hey, Ted?
Yep.
I'm going to email you. Let's pull it up quick here. Quickly pull up this landscape plan.
I'll recognize the hand up while we wait, and we'll definitely get to you next, Addie.
Yes, thanks, Nick.
Okay. All right. I may have to reshare this.
There you go.
Yeah, can you see that here?
Yeah, why don't you zoom in closer on the Washington Street, and then on the right hand side, I think there's a chart of species. But what we're certainly happy to do when we're done with this is email everyone on this call our presentation tonight along with this plan, so you can have it, you can digest it, research it a little bit more. Will certainly be available, for questions or comments going forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does that answer your question, Yvonne? Should we move to Addie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Hi, sorry. Am I able to ask a question?
Yep, go for it. Oh,
There to go, Addie, you're muted.
I think you muted yourself just before asking a question.
Hi, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep, now we got you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't seem to be able. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, this is awesome. I'm a resident of the neighborhood and I also work just across the street. And as someone who parks in the parking lot every day, it's such an unused space and I'm excited that it's getting developed. My question is about, I see it's just 1 and 2 bedroom units. And that's important, but also thinking about, families and people who need larger apartments too. Was there consideration about having like larger units of like 3 or 4 bedrooms? Was that a possibility? And just wondering about that.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So we do have a mix of studio 1 and 2s. Now, we did give some thought to 3s. We didn't give too much thought to 4s, just because typically a flat in an urban setting isn't conducive to a 4-bedroom. But the qualified allocation plan for the state gives us extra points if we have some 3-bedroom units. In all likelihood, our unit mix will probably change to account for maybe up to 3 or 4 3-bedroom units. If this zoning changes goes through and we're able to reposition our amenities on Washington, add maybe 4 more units on the first floor down in the bottom right-hand corner, we can then add probably up to 4 3-bedroom units and still hit that probably 76 unit count, which I think is a good number based on the market study we received. So yes, we did give it some thought, and in all likelihood, we'll probably add a few in.
Could you, Scott, can you explain just a little bit about the process that you're going to go through to request for that change? And then should that be approved, the process that allows you to integrate potentially like a couple of 3-bedroom units or so on?
Yeah, so for the city, it's unit count, it's not unit mix. So we're going to go in and request approval for 80 units. The mix of those 80 units doesn't fall under the approval. So what that flexibility allows us to do to have 80 is, for instance, we're going to lose some studios and 1-bedrooms to create 3 bedrooms. If we can pick up 4 units on the first floor, instead of dropping from say 76 to 72 to get 3-bedroom units, and we can get a little more density on the first floor, we're able to hit that sweet spot and still stay within what will be the city approval of up to 80 units. So unit mix doesn't come into play, but total number of units does.
Addie just messaged me that for some reason her sound is not working, but asked if I could send her a recording. So I will send her that. I imagine that is a response she'll like. Cool. And I'll ask a clarification question. I'm going to ask you to repeat yourself. Sorry, Scott, but
no problem.
Just want to be absolutely clear on what you're asking for from planning. The current zoning, as I understand it, is maybe I read this wrong. I thought it was 1-to-1 parking, and then with affordable housing, they have the ability to make a dimensional variance to 50%.
You're correct.
Okay, and then you're asking for less than that. Okay.
Yes, I did jump to the assumption that they always grant a variance to 50%. So you're right. It is 1-to-1, and the variance would be 50%.
Okay, and that would be a sort of a true variance, not a dimensional adjustment.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be, the parking is discretionary. So the CPC.
Oh, the parking is, yes.
Yeah. So they would have, that would be considered a dimensional adjustment as opposed to a dimensional variance like height. So they, their authority is limited in how many variances they can approve in a single meeting. And that number being 2. So we're going in for a dimensional variance for the height. Being in all affordable projects, we're allowed an additional 2 stories up to 20 feet. I shouldn't say allowed, but we are proposing that. It is in the code. And then for parking, CPC has discretionary approval to reduce parking by up to 50%.
But you're asking for less than 50% parking, right? You're asking for like 1/3 parking to get rid of the
no,
podium,
actually, well, with this plan that you're looking at, this is 50%. So you have 38 parking spaces. And then
with the parallel
TOD.
change, TOD, there is no
The-
parking
Got
requirement.
it. So the TOD
So
is the key to unlocking the less
Is
than 50%.
the key to, yeah, exactly.
got it,
That
got it.
that
Okay.
may take us from 36 to 25, 26. Because under the current, the new modern zoning that they want to have overlaid here, parking is discretionary.
Got
You
it.
can have none.
Yeah. And is the TOD process, is that also through planning or is that through another avenue?
That is through planning and the city council.
Planning in the city council, yeah.
So yeah, so planning recommends, they
Right.
do the review and then recommends for council approval.
Cool. Any other questions?
I had one, sorry to jump around here, but the visual on the first slide and then the west facing slide, I can't remember what slide that was, but was is the cladding different? And I understand you're in an iterative process here. I'm just curious if it looked a bit different.
Yes, that would be, you caught our conceptual
Yeah.
imagery. Yes. So the color colors really, it's, we always and end up deferring to the community in terms of what color works well and what matches well with what. Ideally, what we end up coming up with, we would present in its final condition to you once we get through the process with the city, and we go into our schematic design with our architect and further our architectural plans for our submission to the state. We'll refine this and fine tune this, but again, we'll send this to you, and especially Haley, the architect. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what might work better, what might be a better mix and match. We're using Wojcik Architecture as our architect, who's local, but we also have our goggles on. We're asking to be a part of the community, so certainly want your input on what you think fits well there.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, I also wanted to talk about the elevations a little bit. The scale obviously is pretty big and massive for the area and this neighborhood. And I think maybe trying to break up these long facades a little bit more with kind of more of like a rhythmic pattern. But yeah, I'm also curious about this cedar screen detail. It looks on such a large scale. It looks quite delicate. And I understand it's kind of, using wood warms up kind of more institutional looking building. But I'm curious if that's been done before, or kind of the thought behind that, because kind of seems like a maintenance nightmare.
It is, and this is part of the part of the current zoning code that requires this to be Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, a breathable element, can't be an enclosed fence, and non-transparent.
Yes.
And I mean, I hate to say, waste the time of our architect who did put thought into this, but this won't even exist once podium parking is gone and we're slab on grade and all this is backfilled with resident amenity space. So we're having to show something that we know we're not going to do so we can get it approved prior to the state application. We wholeheartedly agree. It's not the best thing in the world there. It's a requirement, but it's a requirement we know we're not going to end up doing because we'll be slab on grade.
Does that answer your question, Haley, or?
Sorry, I'm multitasking, trying to reach the unmute button. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I kind of read the elevations as the corner kind of massing was also that screening detail, but maybe that's just like a cedar plank, or what's the yellow wood material, the
Yeah,
stripes, the vertical
That's
stripes?
it's a fiber cement board made to look like wood.
Ah, okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other? Oh, go ahead.
So I had a question. I'm sorry if this was asked before I joined, Lee. And if it was answered, I'll just like watch the recording. But can you speak to the AMI breakdown of the units and the energy efficiency standards that have been incorporated?
Sure. So the median income limits, I mentioned we're going to have studios 1s and 2s. So we're going to have a majority of our units are going to be at 60% median income. The studios at $1,015 a month gross rent. The 1 bedrooms $1,088, and the 2 bedrooms at $1,306. We're going to have 8 units, which will be project-based vouchered. So 0 to 30% median income. What the resident pays there will be based on their income, up to 30% of the income. So actually, what a resident pays there will fluctuate based on their certification when they first move in, and then annual certifications thereafter. Part 2 of your question, Ted, I was going to kick that to you. Why? Because you probably know that better than me.
Well, in terms of the AMIs,
No.
what was the?
Nope.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the environmental.
Environmental.
Yes. So we are currently we're exploring. Yes, in brief, we are looking at making this building energy efficient. Above and beyond the building code. We are exploring different avenues with solar, as Scott mentioned. You know, if the financing is available, you know, we'd like to be able to incorporate solar, which could offset some of the utility expenses for the residents, as well as make the building more efficient.
I think last thing is we're still in the early stages of possibly pursuing passive house on this. And that could be a big efficient use of the building. Again, that's in the very early stages right now. We have to contemplate cost versus the sources that are available. But those are the, you know, Energy Star, Silver, passive house, and potential solar panels.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions, or did we do it? I think we did it. Nick, anything final for Scott and Ted?
When will we see you again?
I think the best thing for us to do is, you know, we'll continue to keep you apprised. We have I call it a workshop meeting tomorrow with the planning board prior to the official presentation to the board in December. And I think next time would be after that December meeting. We can then give you as a group an update on where we are and how we're proceeding forward over the next 60 days.
I just want to say earnestly, we really appreciate you coming and presenting and just being open to like a Q&A, and just the whole process has been really awesome. So thank you.
Absolutely. And, you know, just for everyone on here, we're available to you. You don't have to wait till we get back and say we're available. Gabe has my email address, and we're happy to talk to you one-on-one. If you think of something or you have another question down the road, we certainly want to be accommodating.
Great. All right. Well, thank you guys again, and
thank you
to everyone who came out. Appreciate you coming to ask questions and participate.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.